Hello everyone, this is China Paradigm, where we, Dashi Consulting, interview seasoned entrepreneurs in China. Hello everyone, I'm Matthieu David, founder of Dashi Consulting and its podcast China Paradigm. Today, I am with Martin Papp, the founder of PAPP'S TEA, and also you are very involved in the kombucha brewers. I'm not sure if I pronounced correctly, you are going to correct me later on. And you have a very strong experience as well in the music industry in China that I think I'd like to go through with you. First of all, so talking about the tea industry, you have developed this brand yourself, and you are now selling in China. You are based, the headquarters of the company is based in Beijing, and you are selling the products also in Vegas, so not only through your own retail presence or your own online presence, but also through Vegas since 2014 already. So you have a sizable amount of experience in this industry, in the tea industry. First of all, first question, could you give us an idea of the size of your business? It could be number of clients, could be number of places you sell, could be the size of your team, anything which could help the audience to understand what's your size now, where you are, in which stage you are in terms of development.
Sure. Well, first, thanks for having me. I started PAPP'S TEA in 2014, and so I started with opening a Hong Kong company, but with the intent of operating the business out of Beijing. So at that time, we had 0 clients and 0 income, but and 0 connections. But we ended up growing the company to about over 85 B2B clients currently. We're selling in over 350 locations around China, mostly selling high quality, full leaf, all natural teas. We're also doing tea drinks, recipe creation, tea innovation. And as you said, we entered Wagas actually in 2016. And so we work with a lot of Western F&B clients operating in China. Currently, our revenues are generally around 700,000 RMB per month. So we're over $1 million USD dollars annually, which is
the revenues to B2B, right? Not the consumer. You're talking about what you sell to B2B.
It's including in both. So our business is heavily B2B right now, but as a brand and as a startup, everything is about transitioning and pivoting at the right. And so we've all envisioned ourselves as a B2C brand. We're really focused on brand building, and B2B was really a good way to enter the markets as a startup. But the ultimate goal would still have the majority of sales to be from consumers, and we are on our way to do that now. I've also been I went through one round of angel funding in 2017 through Bits and Bytes in Shanghai. I also now have some pretty high caliber members on the team. We recently just had the head of finance from Twinnings of China join our teams. So we've got some really good momentum moving forward, and so we still see ourselves as a startup. We're still operating under the goal of growth, fast growth, and we've been able to already operate operationally at a break even, which has been good.
When did you break even?
You said when did we break even?
Yeah.
We started. So I mean, we haven't recouped our investment, but we started operating with positive cash flow basically since the summer of 2017.
So 3 years after you started.
Yeah, well, just about. Yeah. So the first, we made it past those first dangerous 3 years.
Congrats. That shouldn't have been easy, especially when you deal with a product. I see a lot of service company, which is pretty easy. You don't have many costs, but when you are dealing with products, you have to create a product, you have to you have to make investment basically. I understand. So could you tell us more about how a foreigner can have a market share in a product in a market which is very, very Chinese, or where you have, on the opposite, very big companies? How have you been able to do that?
Well, I mean, it's really always about differentiating yourself and finding a niche. And the one thing that's great about China is that even if you find a very small niche, that is large enough to have a viable business. So I was thinking about some brands the other day that are doing small tea brands and kombucha brands, and brief example, I have a friend from Denmark that's wanting to do kombucha, and we're talking about market size, and they model their business for the whole country, of a population of, I think it's less than 6 million people. For me in China, it's like, well, if I just focus on a very small niche of people in Beijing and Shanghai, I'm already at 10 million people. So
it's a district, right?
Yeah. So so that's the beauty of China, is that it's so that there's really no point as a startup to try to capture a large swath of it, when you very much can start a profitable business, being very niche, very focused on who your target market is. And so that's where I think we succeed, is that there really are while there are hundreds, if not thousands, of tea companies in China, there's still a place for us if we're creating high-end Western concept teas. So we import teas into China. We create creative blends. We're very much always introducing to China a lot of Western trends. So adding things like kombucha, or kind of super herbs like turmeric or chai tea, or these type of products that have taken off in the West, we bring to China. And that's something that a lot of maybe Chinese companies are a bit slower on, or are not as familiar with. We were actually one of the first companies to ever educate Chinese customers about mate, yerba mate, from South America. So there's a lot of fun element in our business of kind of introducing new products that are familiar to Chinese, and yet they know little about. And surprisingly, most Chinese tea companies have taken the path of very high-end, an older demographic. And then you have a lot of Chinese companies that do the food and beverage end, hay teas, the cocoa teas, the bubble teas. And so there was really actually a void, and this is where I kind of came in, is I did not feel like there was a tea brand that was really speaking to my generation, young, white collar folks in China that are looking for good teas, but they also don't want to go to a traditional tea house. And we make tea much more accessible, while still providing a high quality product and not going down to something really cheap. And there's definitely a market for that. And we've had a lot of good response from businesses, especially looking for those kind of products. And now the next step for us is to start leveraging that in expanding into more B2C channels, online sales, using the Tmals and the Taobaos and the WeChat, as well as your more traditional B2C channels, working through supermarkets, maybe directly through gyms and things like that, where customers can get to your product.
To understand better what your products are, could you tell us what the format is? It sold in a can? Is it the leaves you sell? Is it on the other hand in a basket? Could you tell us what the format?
Sure. So our formats are loose leaf tea. So you're buying bulk bags of tea, also in tea bags. So this is where you're getting 3 grams in one single tea bag. And then we also do bottled drinkable teas, RTDs. And that's what the kombucha is we're fermenting tea with yeast and bacteria to create a bottled tea drink. So we do the whole gamut. And that's actually one of the challenges of our startup is probably different than most startups, is that our SKUs and the number of products that we offer as a startup is pretty enormous and requires a lot of work. We probably have, I think, 150 SKUs.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah. I think it was more. It was even more than that, but we've learned to scale back as much as possible and not try to do too much.
I see. Very, very interesting. Because I guess when you have so many SKUs, some of them actually are selling very little, and some are maybe 20. You know, the rule of 20-80. So certainly 20% of your SKU are making 80% of the sales.
Correct. And on top of that, we are a company that is opportunistic. So I think you have to be when you're a startup. And so a lot of people, even after they look all of those teas, they're like, oh, well, why don't you have a tea with, a strawberry flavor that's mixed with Bilo Trend green tea? And I'm like, crap, I don't have that. Well, I'll go make it for you. So we end up doing a lot of, we end up continuing to customize and build on our SKUs, even when we have so many options. But again, I think that's also, and I think this is a good point for this podcast. People look at this and say, oh my God, that's a lot of, work, and you should focus on the 80-20 principle. Like, don't waste your time on stretching yourself too thin. But at the same time, the way I see it is that this is the advantage we have over our competitors. Because I'm a small company, I can go and do those customizable products for you. It's worth it to me. Whereas big tea brands, they're inflexible and they will not be able to meet your exact needs. So I've used the size of our company, our advantage, to be able to provide much more tailored, customized products for customers. I think that's really where our successes come from. Companies have good tea. A lot of tea companies have more resources. They have more channels. They have a bigger staff, more power, buying power. So how do we win our customer over as opposed to the big brands? And that's because we offer more personalized services. We work with the little guys, and
True.
That's how we built our business.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually very surprised you're also doing bottled tea. Reason being is that it involves, I guess, much more regulations because you are mixing with the liquid instead of just the leaves, for instance, of the bags. How do you deal with the regulations? Selling food, selling beverages in China, made in China, produced in China, or assembled in China, is more and more heavily regulated. Has it been complicated, or is it overstated, the complication difficulties?
No, I mean, it's a very good point. I do not think it is overstated. It is very complicated and much more difficult than one may think. It's very unlike, I can relate to the US market because the US market has a very thriving community and also craft community. So you have a lot of individuals that want to their own beer, or create their own kombucha, and they can do that because the legal system to run a small business in the United States has a lot of, they make it accessible. Whereas in China, to run a drink business, as you mentioned, it comes with a lot of red tape. And you have to have scale. You have to have an extensive amount of capital. So, I've been trying to get kombucha off the ground in China for over 2 years, and I've really subsidized the whole project because of my sales of tea. So if I had just started a kombucha brand, I think I'd be in trouble. But because I've got a good growth and consistent sales with my tea, I'm able to kind of experiment into these other. Because I think there's a huge payoff for going into RTDs. If we can get bottled teas in the right channels, you really open yourself up to fast growth, and that's where you could see 10x multiple growth year with those type of convenience products. But the regulation is tough, and to really explain to you how I overcame that is I had to find partners to work with. So highly advise not trying to build a factory yourself until you have significant sales traction.
Did you have to build a factory with someone, or you outsourced it?
Yeah, so I've outsourced everything, but that's not easy with a product like kombucha when it's not being made in China. So you have to really spend a lot of effort trying to find a manufacturing partner to customize their supply line, their production to fit your specifications without you're paying an exorbitant amount of fees or an exorbitant amount of MOQs, minimum order quantities. And so it was really a long process of visiting probably over 30 plus factories, not to mention the 100 factories that we just contacted over the phone. But to really find factories that are willing to work with a startup, willing to work with a company that takes risks and making a product. So to answer your question, we outsource our kombucha and our bottled tea through two processes. One factory makes the kombucha for us, and then we have another factory that actually then bottles it for us. So we were unable to even find a factory that could do the whole thing in one go. So we've had to break the production down into steps.
I see. Very interesting, because I believe that a lot of people who are thinking about producing a product, starting a business, think that they should see it as a pure thing. They should manage everything, should control everything. But already being able to check, to ensure the quality is good, to ensure the process are well respected, is already a lot of work at the initial stage. In terms of checking what the producers would do, what the quality, what has been the more painful?
What are the pain points for checking quality? Is that your question?
Yeah, the quality versus the processes. What have you been focusing on when you check among the 30 factories you visited? What has been the thing you focused on? I understand that some of them may not take small amount of production. Okay, they couldn't work with you, but some of them you have rejected them, I guess, because the processes, quality. What were the factors?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah. So the consistency is a huge issue. Making sure that the product is the same from one production run to the next is a challenge. I mean, it's really hard to answer. It's a really hard question to answer because, I mean, it's every step of the production you're going to run into problems, and it requires. I would say that what to keep in mind is that it's going to take several iterations to create a product that you're happy with. And so I would highly, at least for us, we're on our third generation of kombucha now, and we've had multiple problems, from the very first batch that we had. So just know that you're going to run into problems, and so therefore don't expose yourself to too much risk too quickly. I had the opportunity to go into more supermarkets last year, but I actually restricted our growth a little bit just because I wanted to make sure that we got our production under control, made sure that every batch to batch was consistent. So it's a balancing act of, you want quick sales, everything moves fast in China, but at the same time, don't be afraid to kind of plan out a slower rollout so you have the opportunity to make changes as you go. Because if we launched our first generation kombucha and all the channels that we have now, it would be a disaster. But because we started with the first couple select clients that we had good relationships with, and we're like, here, we want you to test this out, know that it's not perfect, that we're going to be making changes. Having that experimental time is key. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind for anybody looking to do any type of physical product, is that don't put all your eggs in one basket. Take it step by step, because it's not going to be perfect the first time. And I've met some entrepreneurs that need it to be perfect, from the get-go, which is great. But then, they're in development for like 3 years, and then, China's, the opportunity's been lost. So it's really about saying, can I get it to 90% of what I want and sell it? And then know that I'll continue to improve that last 10% as we move forward.
And that's the way China is working. Actually, that's one thing which has been stressed out by many firms, many reports. The way of innovating in China is to create a product, to try to learn from the market and to re-innovate, to reiterate, much more like the lean business. And in Europe or in the West, that's generally speaking, to do much more R&D and then to launch the product without knowing the market, which has made some of the failures of the dot economy collapse in the early 2000s. So I wrote down that you said your competitive advantage was familiarity with the product, familiarity with the sourcing, the product, where it comes from, speed, and to be able to talk to a new generation. I found out, so from what you said, three assets you are leveraging. Familiarity, I can understand, because it may be more difficult for Chinese to be international, to understand the sourcing, to fully understand the product. Clear. But speed, how can you be faster than Chinese? How can you be faster than a Chinese company? Do you feel that it's possible? I feel that's the main barrier for businesses here. They have to be slower.
Mm-hmm. Well, that ties into a little bit about don't be obsessed with perfection. And maybe that's why a lot of Western companies move slower than Chinese. But I think we're kind of like, my team is Chinese. So we do kind of operate with the Chinese kind of work ethic. We work, long hours, 6 days a week, and maybe not as efficiently as a Western company would, but we make up for it in the speed at which we make decisions. What would maybe in the West be calculated as very brash decisions without enough data, but you just got to go. You got to move. We've changed products on the fly all the time to keep up with that speed. Having said that, I would love to take it slower. It's not like I'm driving the company at that speed. It's that our clients are. So, give you an example, our F&B clients, especially some of the nicer, more popular Western restaurant chains, because of the speed in which China changes, you always need new products coming in. So restaurants are changing their menus twice a year at least. So every season, every summer, every winter, you've got to have new products ready. So you don't have time to create, your 10 perfect products and just go with that for the rest of the 10 years. They want change immediately. So there's no point in trying to create something so finite and so final when you know that when winter comes, they're going to want a completely different set of products. So That's maybe specific to my industry, but because it's very different than in the United States. I think when I go to restaurants here, it's like the menu's been the same, and for the last 5. The only thing they do is maybe have it it's inserted every year with kind of like a new product. So it's basically you've got 90% same and then 10% that changes. Whereas in China, I would say at least 50% of the products on a menu are constantly evolving. So you have to be fast. It wasn't that I needed to be fast. It's that was the requirement from our clients. And we learned how to deal with that. So we work. The reason that I say this as an advantage is because bigger companies is harder to move faster when you have more bureaucracy in the company. You have more protocol. Being at a startup level, you're able to make decisions in an afternoon without having to go up 3 levels of command. And this so I would say the smaller the company, the more speed you have at your disposal.
You said you're working 6 days a week. Is it because you have too much work during the weekday? Is it everyone in your team has to work on Saturday or Sunday, like in Alibaba 996, as we know? Is it compulsory, or is it just because it's needed?
It's not compulsory. It's just a mentality. Everybody in your company wants to work hard, and we end up doing things as needed. And so we
so
do.
You're expected to work on Saturday, right? In the company.
We were for the first 3 years. We've kind of toned it down a little bit just in the last. But yeah, we told people when we hired them that it's for the first 3 years. That's how we operated. Yeah.
I see.
And most people that come to a startup, I think, can accept that. I mean, that you don't go to a startup to do the 5 days a week, low working hours.
I need to change the rules in the company then. In my company. So you said I'm a bit surprised that it's a capitalistic business. You have to invest money. At least you have to sustain for some time to find the factories, to develop the product, maybe without much income. And you raised money only in 2017. If I wrote correctly in my notes. Can you explain? There is something I feel I don't understand here.
Yeah. Well, I was not completely accurate in what I was saying. I had seed funding from myself and my wife. So we started with somebody that we put into the business. And then 2017 is when I had an official outside investor come in and invest and kind of professionalize the company. Before, it was really just my wife and I investing our own capital. So yeah. Yes, we're co-founders. Okay. Having said that, she is much more in the background, but very critical the first year, having her around to help navigate the administrative side of things. But
she's Chinese, right?
Correct.
Okay. That explains why it's easier for her.
Sure. Yeah. That wasn't clear, I guess. I highly recommend, having Chinese roots if you're going to run a company in China. It helps a lot to have somebody local in your court that's always going to be on your side. You can do that with Chinese partners too. Not saying it doesn't work, but having the family tied together obviously incentivizes your partner to make the decisions in each other's interests, not just in their personal interests.
Would you give us an idea about the size of funding you got in 2017?
So we had 500,000 US dollars in 2017, and that was split between a venture capital firm in Shanghai and an angel investor, an American angel investor. They split that.
I see.
And then and seed funding still, I mean, seed funding wasn't a small amount either. I had seed about $300,000.
Okay, so total five, let's say 800 so far.
Yes.
I see. How do you, so I guess for your investors, you had a pretty good deal because you already had like 3 years of experience, already the product. So it's not really a seed anymore. How did you
around?
Yeah, it's yeah. Let's say it could even be a Series A, isn't it?
Well, I mean, so 2014 is not an accurate date for when the company started, if that's what it says. That's when I started the Hong Kong. That's when I founded the Hong Kong company. But we didn't actually start selling to our first B2B client until 2016. So,
okay, I see.
So really, the company didn't start in terms of having an office and working, I would say, until 2015, and it really took about a year for us to kind of get something off the ground, and then we had another year of just working on sales. So we went about a year and a half to 2 years before we approached investors for an angel round, and at that time we were having sales of around 200,000 RMB a month. So that's like, let's say 30,000 US dollars a month.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, since then we've basically more than doubled that. Tripled.
Yeah.
At more than
700,000 a month now. How did you get in touch with the investors, and how many did you have to meet before you found a good match?
Yeah, so I think this is a tough one. I don't feel fully qualified to answer because I feel like it's so serendipitous the way I found that round of investments. Because that particular round came really easily because I met Bits and Bytes through a news article about how they're investing in companies just like us. So I would say that I really found, I think, the perfect investor for us. And I think that's so critical because after 2017, it was so easy. Like I went into them and they liked it. And then I told that I was going to raise more. And I just had a friend that was like, hey, I love kombucha too, interested in investing. You know, he's an investor. And I had I met with about 4 people, pitched it 4 times, and I got investments from 2 of them. So,
yeah,
I mean, that's very, very successful. Having said that, I then tried to raise another round in 2018, and I met with at least 20 plus VC companies. And not one of them invested, and so I kind of put a halt on that round of funding, and now plan on doing a new round at the end of this year. So, you know, I had a large amount of success and luck, I think, in 2017, and then 2018 I was completely dry. And at that time, I thought I even had a better pitch. I had a better pitch deck. I had better sales. But just nobody really latched onto the concept. So I think it's kind of a hit or miss business, and it's really just about perseverance and making sure that you're not doing the same thing necessarily over and over. It's people say it's a numbers game. I do agree with that, but it should be a numbers game where every time you maybe make a small adjustment according to the feedback that you get. So that's why I kind of stopped continuing to look for investment in 2018. After about 20 people, I said, maybe I need to rethink about how I'm doing this. And now I'm focusing on getting more traction with our sales and improving our core team. And that's where I said I recently had the head of finance from Twinnings join us. So I'm putting the pieces into place to set myself up for the next round of funding.
I see. What do you need the funding for? Is it to create new products? Is it to enter new distribution channels, or to create your more B2C brand, right? Then and to be less B2B dependent.
Correct. It'd mostly be to do sales and marketing, B2C. That would be a large push for online channels. So that would include advertising, and promotion. It would also be for offline sales channel expansion, which requires quite a bit of to enter, supermarkets and distributors. You have capital to go to trade shows. You need to have capital to pay for stocks in the supermarkets. And then you need to have working capital to, withstand, getting large orders. So, that's a big problem for a company like ours where we're growing, but the payment terms, we don't get paid maybe until 60 days after we make a transaction.
Wow, 60 days. Yeah, for a startup, it's tough. And in China, some people listening to us don't know, but in China, banks don't do working capital loans for such small companies. They do only for very, very big companies. And many companies have the same issues, even if they are seen as big, like doing several tens of millions of US.
Yeah. Banks? What are that? What's that? I've never been to a bank before in China.
Just a bank account. It seems that it has been pretty easy for you to raise this amount of money, like 500K US. But were you afraid about the term sheet to dilute it the right way, with the right amount of percentage? How did you have the metrics? How did you know how much to dilute, how much to value your work, and how much to value the capital they inject? How did you work out over this?
Yeah. I didn't, and I had to learn as I went. So it required talking to mentors, talking to people in the industry to get advice. Just if one investor doesn't invest in you, turn them into an advisor instead. Some of the best advisors are the people that feel bad that they didn't invest in your company. So I'll say hey, don't worry, you didn't invest, that's fine. But here, check, deal I've got here. What do you think? What should I be negotiating here? I think one of the things that an entrepreneur needs to do is to be able to ask for help is in many places, and to leverage everybody that you know. And I do believe in the the concept that you have to send out and admit a signal of what you want in order to get it back. So it's very much about just, when I was going through that process, I just talked about it with everybody I knew. It's like, hey, I didn't try to keep it to myself. I said, hey, got this investor that maybe will invest. How much do you think I should give up the company? So I got a lot of different opinions. And eventually, I think I got a pretty good deal. I did basically, we're operating at 21, so 200,000 RMB a month. That's about 2,400,000 RMB a year. And I valued the company with that angel round at 20 million RMB. So it's about a 10x of sales.
That's a pretty good valuation.
Correct. So I think I did a good job of negotiating that. Offered 15% of the company. And so that went pretty smoothly overall. Term sheets, I think are very important, but I think more importantly, you got to find the right investors that have the same vision as you. So I think I get very lucky with my two investors, is that they are very encouraging. They're enablers. They're not restricting me in any way. They're always trying to find ways to help me, and I really appreciate that. And so, I think probably a lot of startups, run into a lot of issues when they get the wrong investor on board.
How often do you meet with them? You said they're helpful, but is it something very organized, like every month? Is it just when you need, you ask them some advice? How do you work with them?
It was quite structured in the first year, and that is because they are a fairly professional angel investor. So they were actually running what you'd consider an accelerator program, and I would meet with them. Every week I'd have a phone call.
Every week?
Yeah. But it was as I said, it was from a very supportive role. It's like, how can we help you? What are your challenges? Who do you need to talk to? And I found that very helpful. Having said that, after about 6 months, we reduced the amount of contact time to about once a month. Then after a year, I would say now it's basically contact on a need to basis. So I'd say we're probably in touch maybe once or twice every couple months or something like that.
I see. We talk about your company, we talk about your product. I'd like to talk a bit more about the market, the niches you mentioned. You define the niche, as far as I understand, more as a generation, more as a younger generation. So this is interested in tea still, or kombucha, and also I'd like to have the perspective on the two products. Could you tell us more about the market? What do you see in the market?
So specifically for kombucha or for tea? Let's start with one.
I think both of them are interested. And before we go to kombucha, could you define more the product? I'm not sure everyone who listening to us will be familiar with.
Sure. Talk about kombucha first, and then I'll talk about tea. So kombucha is a tea that is a sweet tea that is fermented with yeast and bacteria, most specifically Acetobacter and Lactobacillus. And what you create is something very similar to a cider or vinegar even. So it's a very sour, sweet, tangy, fizzy tea drink. This has become very popular in the West, specifically the United States. It's over $1 billion now in the United States. So it's really grown in popularity for its health properties. It's a low-calorie, low-sugar drink that contains probiotics, organic acids, great for digestion. It also carries a lot of the benefits of normal tea drinks. So it has lots of polyphenols, antioxidants. We are the first company to launch this product commercially in China, at least an authentic version of it. And this is very ironic because kombucha, the origins of kombucha actually come from China. So you basically had in traditional Chinese medicine, in homes, brewing these little what we call scobies, symbiotic colonies of bacteria and yeast in their tea, and they would drink them as a medicinal drink. But it reminds
me. Sorry to cut you, but that reminds me the story of Red Bull, which is coming from Thailand, and I guess at some point they entered Thailand, and the recipe was coming from Thailand. So it's very, very interesting story.
Yeah. And this is very similar to our tea as well. Is that what we do as our company? My company is called PAPP'S TEA. Is we end up taking things that originally are traditionally Chinese, and we really just reinvent to show a more kind of Western spin on an ancient Chinese product. So, and that's what kombucha is. I mean, it's taken this ancient Chinese tea elixir that had really kind of died out in popular Chinese culture. It was quite popular in the 80s. So I actually know a lot of older Chinese people that familiar with it, but most young Chinese are not. And so what we've done is we've taken that traditional Chinese concept and put it into a bottle, carbonated it, and served cold. And these are all very American things to do, like, drink something cold and carbonated. That's not the first thing that Chinese usually think to do. So we basically took a Chinese product and westernized it. I did not do this. This was done in the United States. It became popular. And so now we're bringing this to China. And it's really fascinating because there is a much more sophisticated market here for fermented products. So in the United States, everybody's like, oh, cool, probiotics, and
so when you say here, when you say here, because you are now in the United States, are you saying the United States or China?
No, I mean in China. So when I say my physical spirit is in okay. is in China.
Let's talk about physical spirit. Then. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, myself as a Chinese person almost now. So here in China, it's a very sophisticated market for fermented products. Chinese consumers are very familiar with the benefits of fermented products. They get it. Things like Acetobacter and Lactobacillus sound very scientific and to Western ears, and you're like, I don't know what that is. But in Chinese, when you translate it in Chinese, people hear these words all the time, like 醋酸菌, 乳酸菌. It's very common. So you don't need to convince anybody about what's beneficial about a probiotic drink in China. So the challenges though are quite the opposite in that there is so many fermented products in China. How does kombucha differentiate itself? What makes kombucha more interesting than, say, the guocu on the shelves in China? So China has tons of beverages with fermented fruits, fermented foods. And so the challenge here is trying to create an identity in already a crowded space. And that's very different than in the United States, where kombucha has been this kind of new trend that really didn't have an existence. So in that sense, China is a very interesting market. It's hard to tell exactly how it's going to go, but our stake in the ground is maintaining the Western authenticity of kombucha. So being part of Kombucha Brewers International and making sure that people see that what they do in America and what kombucha is, we're not just, creating a market spin-off of that. We're actually bringing this to China and making authentic, craft brewed kombucha and doing it in the same spirit that Western companies are doing.
To be clear on kombucha, I see on your LinkedIn profile that it's written head of Asia territory. Does it mean that you are an importer into the Chinese market?
No, it means that I am providing support for other kombucha brewers in Asia. So there are kombucha companies in China, in Taiwan, Hong Kong, South Korea, and Japan, Indonesia, even India, and so we're creating a coalition of basically sharing resources, talking about the best practices of brewing kombucha. So KBI is really an organization about educating other brewers how to brew kombucha properly. So we're
an association. Okay, I see.
Yeah, an association to grow the category together.
I understand. Nice. Before we move on tea, on kombucha, could you tell us why you say that you are creating the market? Does it mean that if I go on Baidu, if I write a Chinese name for kombucha, I find nothing. I find nothing. If I go on JD.com, I find nothing. If I go to shops, I find nothing. Does it mean that, or does it mean that there is a specific segment you are talking about within this market that you don't find?
And it's changing quickly. So last year, if you went online to these platforms and typed in kombucha, you wouldn't find anything except us. However, now in the last 12 months, you start to have some Chinese brands creating some what I think are very non-authentic, gimmicky kombucha products. So now you do start to see them online, and one of the reasons that it hasn't really become a thing in China is because the challenges of manufacturing a fermented tea drink and importing that into China is not easy for American companies. To this point in time, there is no that I'm aware of that has imported kombucha into China.
I see. About the market, who is the typical consumer of kombucha? Do you think? What could be the larger segment, the current segment, and the future and larger segment? How would you define it?
Sure. The current segment is white collar, 25 to 35 years old. Generally has exposure to Western culture. They've heard about kombucha from their friends, or when they studied abroad, or when they worked abroad, or the expat community in China that's looking for kombucha. That's the immediate group. And now the future of what we intend to see is a much broader expansion of kombucha to consumers that are health oriented, looking for low calorie, low sugar drinks that have the purchasing power to try craft products, because our kombucha price point is not cheap. We sell retail 28 yuan per bottle. So that is 280 milliliters.
Okay, I see. Yeah, it's not cheap.
Yeah, so it's comparatively, people can buy a juice for 8 kwai, 7 kwai. So we are at least quadruple that. And so it's definitely a premium product. But having said that, the consumption upgrade, people are looking for higher quality products, higher quality drinks that are going to bring more health benefits, more functionality. So we see a lot of growth potential in a few channels. One would be the athletic community, people looking for functional beverages. So that's, like I said, in the gymnasiums, the gyms, the marathon, these kind of places. You want to have kombucha. Then you also have the non-alcoholic craft scene is also quite large and growing. Bars. We've actually found that our kombucha sells the highest volume of sales from one particular location actually comes from a bar in Shanghai. And that's because people are looking for non-alcoholic options, but still want the craft experience.
I see.
And then you also have the supermarket channels and the online channels, the Taobaos, the Tmals, the Jingdongs. And that would be expanded via KO, so working with key opinion leaders to talk kombucha to their followers and make sure that of health is foremost. I mean, it's a health functional beverage, and that is appealing and is a growing market. So there's no reason that this shouldn't expand. It just needs to be executed properly.
I see. Talking about tea now, you were saying that there was a generational challenge for tea brands to target younger generation. I understand that. First question is, so if the younger generation don't drink tea in China, what is more trendy for them to drink, first thing? And second thing, how do you position yourself toward a younger generation? I see the logo is clearly your logo. Papp's is already looking much more younger than most of the other traditional tea brands, which are very, very, very established, right? I already have the feeling of that, but could you elaborate more on this?
Sure. Well, and to be clear, I think young people in China still drink a lot of tea. I mean, China is still clearly a tea drinking country. I did some own market research in 2014. We were planning on starting this company. I actually went physically multiple Starbucks stores in Beijing, Chengdu, and Xiamen, and I basically to people sitting in Starbucks with a survey, and I told them that I was doing research on the consumer habits of coffee drinking and tea drinking, and I had Starbucks customers fill out a form saying, do they prefer drinking tea or coffee? What generally speaking, what occasion do you drink coffee? What occasion do you drink tea? And so I asked them a lot of consumer questions, and I found that about 50% the Starbucks customers, so we're just talking about people in a cafe, prefer tea over coffee. So I mean, the idea, the notion that young Chinese aren't drinking tea, I think is not correct. You can definitely say that coffee consumption is growing. That's undeniable. And so what was interesting is not that young Chinese don't want to drink tea, is that they're going to Starbucks because they can't find a location that really that is a tea location that fits to their lifestyle or to their image. So they don't want to go to a traditional Chinese tea house. They want to be, more modern, more cool, more fashionable. And so there was this void. There was no place for my friends to go drink tea in Beijing. Now, in terms of the market and these Chinese companies, why didn't they see this and act on it earlier? And they are changing, by the way. This is there's been rapid development in Chinese tea innovation and tea houses in the last couple of years. But around 3 to about 4 years ago, there really wasn't much. And I think that was because there's such a strong culture of Chinese tea and history behind it, and they're very proud of their Chinese tea, that it became very insular. So it was very always about being kind of this high-end kind of Chinese tea ceremonial experience, and they honestly just kind of got old and rigid, and didn't realize that there was huge opportunity to reinvent themselves into something more westernized or a little bit more trendy, and I really wanted to take it. And one of the things that U.S. companies have done a good job with is making tea crude and fun, and blending teas from all over the world. In China, it's such a purist tea culture, where the idea of even drinking an iced tea or adding sugar to tea was kind of, taboo for
your word is changing. Your word is changing. Sicha is changing it. Haiti, and the English name is Haiti, and Sicha is the Chinese name. Seems that they are changing a bit the game. And the very interesting topic you raise is the fact that sometimes some companies are stuck with their own identity. They are stuck with their own origins, and the new player can reinvent it. So this dynamism is leaving some space to new players. I think it's very, very interesting. So far, you say younger Chinese still drink tea, but they don't find a tea which is cool enough for them to share with their friends, to be more cool enough to have a less official or serious or gathering. That's what you are saying, right?
Yeah, essentially. I mean, people want to drink things that are unique to their age group, that are unique to their friends, and not necessarily the same tea that their grandfather drinks or their father drinks. So people are looking to be different, and there was really not a lot of tea companies taking advantage of that. And so we're definitely right in that space and saying, hey, we want to bring you great tea. We're going to do it in a more creative and more fun way. And that's worked out well for us. Having said that, the competition is growing. So we were a very early mover, 4 years ago when we started. But already, I mean, it's there's tons of innovation now in tea, and there's tons of new tea houses opening. So the gap that I'm talking about is being filled very quickly.
Martin, I think we have a lot of other topics to talk about, including the music experience you had. I would have liked to go into it, but it's very late for you. You enjoy it. It's already in California. It's already 1:30, I think. So I think we're going to end now. I thank you very much and congratulations for everything you've done. To be present in 350 locations, getting 85 B2B clients for a beverage in the beverage industry is not easy as a foreigner. And I think I'm not sure all our listeners know how hard it could have been. I can imagine. I've been in China for 10 years, so I can imagine how hard it can be. So congratulations for what you did, and thank you very much for staying that late.
No, thank you. I had a great time talking with you. Thank you.